Radical remission is when someone has overcome a dire cancer prognosis, typically a stage 4 diagnosis, without any conventional care, so an alternative approach, or after conventional care fails them and they take a sort of alternative approach or complementary modalities are used, or if they use an integrative approach, the best of both worlds, Western medicine and the alternatives, and overcome that dire prognosis when they have a 25% or less chance of a 5-year survival.
And they're still up walking around telling the tale, 10 years after the fact?
Exactly. Even if it's 5 years later, even if it's 20 years later, we've got stories of people that have overcome and are living their best life.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Karla Mans Giroux with us on the show today. Karla is the co-director of the Radical Remission Project and co-founder of Health Navigators, a virtual cancer wellness community. Since cancer's touched so many of us, I've asked Karla here to discuss proven tools to help navigate the cancer journey. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now, let's go chat with Karla. Karla, welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled to have you. I'm such a big fan of
Oh,
you
thanks,
and your
Julie.
colleagues. Yeah, so
You.
I've been wanting to have you on for a long time, and the day has finally come. So
Yay.
yeah, I want everybody to get out your pen and your notebook because you're going to learn a lot from Miss Karla today, and it's going to be helpful to you and everybody in your family. So get ready. No pressure, Karla.
Right. No, I'm good.
Oh, jeez. What does the term radical remission mean to you?
So, radical remission is when someone has overcome a dire cancer prognosis, typically a stage 4 diagnosis, without any conventional care, so an alternative approach, or after conventional care fails them and they take a sort of alternative approach or complementary modalities are used, or if they use an integrative approach, the best of both worlds, Western medicine and the alternatives, and overcome that dire prognosis when they have a 25% or less chance of a 5-year survival.
And they're still up walking around telling the tale, 10 years after the fact?
Exactly. Even if it's 5 years later, even if it's 20 years later, we've got stories of people that have overcome and are living their best life 20, 30 years later.
Yeah. And they were sent home to die, basically.
Yeah, many of them were. When Dr. Kelly Turner first did the research, and the book is 10 years old, so her research is probably about 15 or more years old, but she found people that had overcome a dire prognosis. The medical community calls it a spontaneous remission, and she decided to call it a radical remission because they did so much work to overcome. So there wasn't anything spontaneous about it. Now, occasionally, you will get the spontaneous remission, act of God, something like that. There are some of those stories. But most of the people, the 1,500 plus people that Dr. Turner did the study on, overcame by utilizing the 10 lifestyle factors that she uncovered. And these aren't lifestyle factors that she made up. These are things that every single one of these survivors were doing. And she she found that there were 10 common among every single one of them.
As if they're common denominators, regardless of
Yes.
nationality or socioeconomic or education level or sex or age even. Is that correct?
Exactly. And it doesn't matter what type of cancer. And some people have actually used these lifestyle factors to overcome another chronic illness or disease.
Mm-hmm. So I want to really get down into those and explore those here in a minute. But first, what motivated Dr. Turner to even go down this path to study this?
Yeah. So Kelly Turner is a oncology social workers where she started. And when she was doing that work, she was getting really disheartened by the number of patients that she was losing. And she decided to do a little looking and, or I think she ran across a story accidentally about a man who'd had what they called a spontaneous remission. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, we need to find out what he did. What did he do? We need to know so everybody else can do this." So she started digging in, and this was during her University of California, Berkeley days when she was going through her PhD. And she ended up deciding to do her dissertation research on this because she found so many more cases of what the medical community called spontaneous remissions. And she wondered why no one had looked at what they'd done to overcome because she thought it would be really useful for everybody to know this. So that's what got her started. She was really passionate about it because she'd lost people. She remembers when she was young losing a really good friend to cancer, just, the tender age of, I don't know, 15 or 16. So this was something that really inspired her to do this research and do this work. And initially, she reached out to a lot of healers and practitioners because she didn't think she'd be able to get people to talk to her about what they did, right? But she did end up finding the survivors themselves, and the healers and practitioners led her to more of those survivors, and they were happy to tell their story. They were thrilled that somebody wanted to know what they'd done because, as some of us know, the medical community is like, "Oh, okay, great, good for you." And they don't wanna know any more about it. But keep in mind, those doctors that we're typically reporting back to are not researchers. So they're oncologists just trying to help everybody they can help in the best way they know how. So what Dr. Turner found was that there were a lot of people willing to tell their story and share what they had done. And I mentioned there were 10 common factors, but overall, she uncovered about 75 different factors that they used. These 10 were common among every single one of these radical remission survivors
From around the world.
from around the world. She traveled 10 countries in 10 months, talking to I don't know how many people she met with, and then did interviews and surveys and, interviewed after the fact via phone, that kind of thing, and continued to collect those stories. So she created the Radical Remission Project and a database that collected stories. And when she wrote the second book, the follow up book called Radical Hope in 2020, she had lots more stories to tell and stories to tell of people that had overcome things other than cancer.
I read in her book too that early on when she met the first patient that said he'd been in remission for 5 years or however long it was, and she said, "Well, what's that?" And he explained it to her, and she asked a couple of oncologists about it, and she said, "Well, do you tell your patients, that there are people that are having these remissions and they've been cancer-free for years?" And she heard from the oncologist, "No, we don't do that." And she said, "Well, why not?" And the doctor said, "We don't wanna give give them a false sense of hope." And in her book, she says that was really one of the catalysts for her to be led to take this further and to really research it because she thought, "Why in the heck would you deny somebody who's had a cancer diagnosis a false sense of hope?"
Yeah,
Didn't
I
make
don't think there's any
sense.
such thing as false hope. I think if you have hope, you have hope, and that's great. And everybody should be hoping for something better, for an easier time of it, whatever their journey ends with.
Yeah. Well, how did you become involved with the project?
So, I myself am a radical remission survivor. I had breast cancer in 2003. And after I hit my 10-year cancerversary, I thought I was safe. I thought, that's it. I'm done. Yay, me. But at 11 years, I got a metastatic breast cancer diagnosis. So that cancer had been slowly growing, or something prompted it to pop up. And I had bone mets. So cancer had spread to my bones, all over my spine, my hips, my pelvis, ribs, clavicle. It was all over my torso. And I decided I needed to do everything I possibly could, that my life depended on it. So I didn't want to just take the meds the doctor was prescribing. I wanted to do so much more. And I immediately started changing my lifestyle. I did find a cancer coach. At the time, I had no idea. This was 2014. I had no idea there was any such thing as a cancer coach. Now there's a lot of cancer coaches, or maybe I just know more of them. But the lifestyle changes that I started to make, including the physical things of diet and exercise and herbs and supplements, along with emotional and spiritual changes, really helped me to arrest cancer. The things I started to do immediately after my diagnosis, along with the conventional med I was taking, arrested cancer. And by my 3-month follow up scan, it was not changing, no growth. So that's a good thing. We don't want it to continue to grow. And then by my 6th month and, 1 year and, each scan, it remained stable and it started to recede. And actually, I knew it was receding early on within those first 3 months because my symptom was numbness in my leg and my leg would fall out from underneath me. So it was as if I had a pinched nerve. And in fact, cancer was pinching a nerve. Cancer was growing in such a way in a nerve pathway that it was pinching off a nerve. So imagine a hole in your bone that the nerve passes through, but cancer is starting to grow on that bone and fill that bone up and pinch down on that nerve. So that's how I found it. And within 3 months, I wasn't falling down anymore. The numbness was receding. So I knew that what I was doing was the right thing to be doing. So I kept at it.
And what did your doctor say when you were coming in and when they were telling you about the results? Did he or she wanna know what you were doing, or did they what was that communication gel like?
Right. I had a lovely conventional oncologist. He was with me for the first diagnosis when I went through chemo, radiation, and a mastectomy. And he took me back when I got the metastatic diagnosis. And one of the first things he said to me, we were on the phone, and he told me, "This is a chronic disease we can manage." So God bless him. Great. I'm going to manage the hell out of this. And that's what I did. But later, he didn't ask what I was doing. He didn't want to know what I was doing. Just, take the meds. And when I would ask about diet, nutrition, herbs and supplements, any of that kind of stuff, he would poo poo me. He would tell me, oh, well, that's a waste of your money, but, there's that integrative center over there if you want to go see somebody over there. So to me, it's kind of silly to have an integrative center at a major medical center because it's not at all integrated. It's simply an alternative where they utilize the evidence-based modalities of yoga, meditation, acupuncture, massage, some herbs and supplements, some nutrition consultation. But I went over and I talked to them and I pieced together my own plan and I had my cancer coach and I did the best I could. But a year and a half into my personal journey, I had a liver tumor show up. And that was a little bit scary because it had only been in bone. I didn't want it in organs. That makes things a little bit more complicated. And I switched my care at that time from that conventional oncologist to an integrative oncologist. That integrative oncologist was a true partner with me in the mind, body, and spirit modalities. Prescribed a diet, prescribed herbs and supplements, did testing, really partnered with me on, stress management and my best health. And that liver tumor was fully resolved within 6 months, and I've seen no evidence of disease ever since. So it's been 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yes, yes, I'm
Congratulations.
so blessed. So, so
My
lucky.
goodness. So was your integrative cancer doctor an MD or
Yes.
a DO?
He is an MD. He is actually not an oncologist, but has been in integrative oncology for over 40 years, has an oncologist on staff, a nutritionist on staff. They really believe there's a better way, a different way to go about overcoming a cancer diagnosis.
And what about them being involved in a were they in a university medical center setting or a big medical center or just on their own? They were separate. They were separate. And and it sounds like your regular oncologist just kinda said, "Well, whatever, it's kinda out there, but if you wanna go talk to them, it's okay."
Yeah,
Is
I
that
got
kinda
the
was that the feeling you
Pretty
got?
much. I got the feeling from my conventional oncologist, he knew of this integrative oncologist. They're both in the Chicago area and had run across each other before. Um, I got the impression he didn't have a lot of respect for him. And, okay. He does my integrative oncologist does my integrative oncologist does follow the standard of care. So he is recommending chemotherapy as appropriate. He does a special style of chemotherapy that's, exclusive to his practice. But he also does the testing and the assessments that help people determine what does their body need to build up the immune system so that it can start to heal and to handle the treatment better. And sometimes what you do with nutrition and supplements and body and mind and spirit builds you up in such a way that the treatment is more effective and there's less side effects.
I'm hearing about more acupuncture centers being put into the oncology department at large medical centers, in some instances, a lot of teaching centers too. And I have many clients who, once they're done with their chemo treatment, they immediately go to the acupuncture department and get a treatment there, like, you know, 15 minutes later or an hour later or something, because what I've heard from them is that it really helps negate the severity of the chemo treatments. Is that something that you have found as well?
I did personally utilize acupuncture back with my initial diagnosis in 2003, and it really helped me to get through chemotherapy. It really took care of the nausea and the fatigue in a way that made it possible for me to just really keep going. And acupuncture is one of those evidence based modalities that the medical world says, yeah, at the time, 2003, I got poo pooed. No, 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 don't do that. And after the surgery and everything was over with, I thought, "You know what? I'm doing this anyway. I really don't care that they say not to. It's not gonna hurt me." I had to fight against my husband just a little bit, but because he wanted me to follow doctor's orders. But I really, felt like it was a huge help getting through chemotherapy.
Mhm. I'm starting to see a change in the zeitgeist, if you will, in how people are looking at this. I believe because of your efforts and your colleagues' efforts and lots of others, where they'll certainly my clients who have cancer, and I have many that have cancer, will come to me. I always say I'm part of the healing equation as a medical intuitive and energy healer. And I'm like a human MRI. I can see inside people's bodies with their permission. And I can see when cancers metastasize. I can see lumps. I can see tumors. I can see if they look malignant or not. Malignant looks dark, almost has a sticky tarish kind of, feel to it to me, and it's not smooth. I always say it reminds me of a head of cauliflower a lot of the time where it's kinda lumpy and bumpy, whereas a benign tumor will look just pink and healthy, but it's just a tumor to me. Furthermore, when somebody has metastasized cancer, I always say it reminds me of a dairy cow. You got the white cow and they got the black spots on them, and it's like somebody's thrown a blob of paint on them. And that's what metastasized cancer looks like, and I can see it throughout the body. I also watch DNA healings and I watch other healings that happen that have an effect. And I always say it's part of the healing equation because nobody heals anybody else. We all heal ourselves. And I think you're great proof of that, that you said, "Okay, there's more to this equation. Nobody's making any guarantees to me about that this is gonna be 100% effective, and the bottom line falls with me. I'm the CEO of my own body here." And so good for you to have the courage to seek out other things. Along those lines, why is it that people are afraid to try other things than what their conventional oncologists are telling them?
So many of us were raised to believe that the people in the white coats are the authority. They've been through the training, they're the experts, they know best, follow their orders, do what they tell you to do. And we also have this misperception that cancer is a death sentence. There are so many of us living with cancer. I call it the roommate you never wanted, but the one that won't leave, right? So we've got this roommate that's moved in and can't get rid of it, but there's no reason to fear it. It's scary and we're human and we're gonna have some fear and some anxiety and things about it, but we definitely need to get a better handle on it. And I'd really like to change the perspective. Cancer's not a death sentence. And the doctors that we work with from the conventional side have only been trained in surgery, chemo, and radiation. They get very little to no training on nutrition. They don't learn about acupuncture, herbs and supplements, or yoga or meditation. They don't learn any of that. And then they have some liability. They need to follow the standard of care, right? And they need to say certain things or they can't say other things. I can't tell you how many people have told me that their doctor told them or they heard the story of a doctor that shared under their breath in a whisper as they were leaving, "You should read Radical Remission," right? Because it's not accepted as a way of overcoming your cancer. But there is research and there's more and more research like that. There's more people writing books and following Kelly Turner's footsteps and people that are, looking at what else can we do to help our bodies overcome and heal themselves. And so many of the other books about cancer and the things you can do, whether it's the mix of 6 or the 7 or the 10 terrain or whatever it is, they're so similar. It's body, mind, and spirit efforts to really find whole health.
Mhm. Say more about the body, mind, and spirit part of the equation. But first, before I lose this thought, I have several friends that are physicians, and they tell me that a lot of this, and there's no malintent on any physician's part. I mean, they're doing the best they know how to do, what they were trained to do, what their societies suggest that they do. And there's always a component of malpractice insurance being in effect because they all have certain checklists that they have to mark the box. Okay, I asked my client about this. I offered that. I did this in order for them to be protected under their malpractice insurance, and rightfully so, that they need to have that because nobody's perfect and sometimes they get sued and that's their livelihood. That's their family's livelihood. They're not mistreating somebody on purpose, but it's all part of what's become to be known as our medical system
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, and the individual doctors, you're right. They're people. They're doing the best they can. They got into this field because they wanted to help and they're helping. And then they're constrained by what insurance and big medical and pharma and all of that, allows them to do or permits them to do or just 7 to 15 minutes for an appointment. How can you really find out much from somebody? But they're doing the best they can and they are experts in their field of expertise. So, what we tell people about radical remission, one of the factors is called empowerment, and you need to be your own advocate. So, that conventional oncologist can absolutely be a member of your team. They have expertise, valuable expertise that can help you, but it doesn't mean they're the only member of your team. You can have an acupuncturist and a naturopath and an energy healer or an intuitive like yourself on the team other people to tell you that, okay, so they know about that and I know about this. And you have to be the one that feels empowered enough to sit at the head of the boardroom table and become the CEO of your health. Listen to your experts around the table and their opinions and their advice and make the final decision for yourself once you've weighed it all out.
And what do you say to people who have a loved one, perhaps a spouse or a parent or somebody else who's close to them, maybe even a child, and they want to explore these other methodologies in conjunction, perhaps with conventional treatments, and they're getting shut down and they're frustrated and they get angry at the person who's the patient and all that. What do you suggest to them?
Well, the patient, again, needs to be empowered. The individual who's dealing with the diagnosis needs to be able to manage that resistance, whether it's the external resistance of family, friends, or doctors, as well as their own internal resistance in the form of self doubt or fear. And it's a lot about tapping into your intuition and really standing strong in what is right for you and honoring that, right? And it's this situation where they think, "Oh, what you can only do this, not this and that." For me, I'm doing this and that. And a lot of doctors don't wanna hear about it. They don't want you to take the herbs and supplements because they don't know anything about it. They don't know how that's gonna affect your chemo. So, no, no, don't take anything. We know, and I'm just gonna probably misstate this, but it was something like over 90% of people with cancer are utilizing herbs and supplements without any negative effect. And so sometimes people choose not to tell their doctors, other times they do choose to tell their doctors. But when family members are resistant, it's fear. It's all about the fear that's coming up for everybody. And we all have a story of somebody in our life that has cancer or had cancer and is no longer with us. And that gets everybody fearful and scared. And you got to do what they tell you to do. You can reassure your friends and family that I am doing what they tell me to do. And I'm going to do these things as well in order to help me get through this the best. There are people that choose a completely alternative approach, though, and that is certainly their choice. And if that feels right to them, some people are so afraid of chemotherapy. And unfortunately, the medical community is really still practicing on a maximum tolerated dose. Not everybody can handle the maximum tolerated dosage. And so by asking your doctor if you can do a lower dose or you can do um, a version of it, whether it's 25% lower, 50% lower, there's low dose chemotherapy now. There's other ways that it can still be beneficial. And there are other things you can do while you're going through chemotherapy that makes it more effective. So it's a matter of getting your own education, finding people that can help you to learn more and do research. PubMed.gov is the best place to do the research. And really then advocating for yourself what you feel like you need, even when it's against somebody else's desires.
And what do you say to the inverse of that? Somebody has a spouse who's been diagnosed, and the spouse doesn't want to hear anything about non conventional or complementary care. How does the spouse who wants to advocate for that, wants to get their husband, let's say, who's been diagnosed, to explore maybe complementary methodologies? What can you say that can help support that person who's trying to offer these other alternatives
I would say
to their
keep
loved one?
keep looking at it and keep offering it. Don't preach, don't push. They've gotta come to it on their own accord, right? You can lead a horse to water, can't make it drink. Finding information that is, simple, easy to read, this is great, like, show your support. I'm all about you doing the conventional medicine, but would you please also look at this? And the books, Radical Remission and Radical Hope, are great places for people to start because they're easy to read, they're inspiring, they're full of hope, talk about people that are overcoming, and they're listing out those 10 lifestyle changes. But I will tell you, Julie, there are people that don't wanna make changes. I would rather I've heard people, "I would rather die than give up my wine and cheese." That's their journey. If that's their choice, right? We can't change people unless they're in diapers. Mm-mm-mm.
Oh, that's quotable, girl. That's good.
It's not my original, but
Well, that's worth poaching.
it is,
That's
right? I poached it from Chris Carr of Crazy Sexy Cancer. She said
oh,
that in
that's
a
great.
podcast interview, and I'm like, "I love it, I'm using it," and I've been using
Oh,
it
that's
ever
great.
since.
That's great. I do with everybody with whom I work, whether they call into my show or whether they're a private client, and whether it's they're the ones that are dealing with cancer or they have a loved one who is, that is the number one recommendation on my follow-up list to them is get Radical Remission and read it or listen to it. It's so profound. I'm such a huge fan, as I said, of your work. And I always say there's the body has a tremendous capacity to heal. The body is programmed to heal. So many people say, well, I have an autoimmune thing and my body's attacking itself. No, it's not. Your body can't attack itself. It's not possible. Your body's only programmed to heal. And we can help it along the way with a bunch of different modalities, but your body is programmed to heal. Now, sometimes death is the healing for the person who doesn't want to give up their cheese and crackers and whatever else they're doing that's causing an issue. But yeah, it's been really, really fascinating to watch the healings occur in my client base and people who call into my show and they were sent home to die. And I say, we need to put your story in Radical Remission because you're a great example of this. Let's back up for a minute, Karla. You've mentioned a couple of times the body, mind, spirit connection. And probably 30 years ago, I went to a talk of Herbert Benson from Harvard, who was a research scientist up there. And it actually, the talk was at Vanderbilt in Nashville. And he was one of the first ones, to my knowledge, in the modern day medical community to say, look, guys, there's more to it here than just a body and cells and DNA and genetics and stuff like that. We've got a spiritual component going on here. So please say more about that, what you've experienced, not only yourself, but also what you've experienced in working with your clients and people who've contributed to your research.
Yeah, the body, mind, and spirit, all of the 10 healing factors fall into those 3 categories. There's only 3 physical factors, and that's the diet, exercise, and herbs and supplements. The other 7 are emotional and spiritual factors. And we are not a whole person without our spirit and our mind, right? So we're not just a body, and we can't work on just the body. We need to work on the whole person. And so it's a lot about our mindset and our beliefs, and there is a strong connection there. Well, science has proven the mind-body connection, right? You have a mind-body connection. What your mind is thinking about can be produced in the body. Just we do this real quickly and easily with people and say, imagine sucking on a lemon slice. What is your reaction? Your mouth starts to salivate, you pucker, you get that look on your face. Were you really sucking on a lemon? No. That is the mind-body connection. You're thinking about imagining what it would be like to suck on a lemon, therefore your body's reacting. So if our bodies, if our mind's that powerful, we should use it to heal our bodies. We should believe that our mind plays a big part in our healing and believe that we can make changes and do things that help us, help our bodies get stronger, build up the immune system. Every one of the healing factors in Dr. Turner's research builds the immune system. And she cited independent research for each of these that says why that particular factor, in fact, does build up the immune system. And when you're facing cancer or some other diagnosis, you want the strongest immune system you can possibly get. And what we put into our bodies and our minds, the input, whether it's food, television, news, social media, that's all input. And that input is what we're living off of. That's our fuel, especially when it comes to the food, right? But it's also fueling our minds and what we're thinking about. And social media and the news and things like that can be so negative, and therefore your mind is sending negative thoughts and energy to the body. So if that can happen, then the inverse can happen. Send the positive thoughts, send the positive energy, send the new beliefs into your energy field, and there'll be a big difference for you. There'll be a change. I see lots of people, lots of clients that I need to work with on their mindset before we can start talking about lifestyle changes like increasing your positive emotions or getting the right social support or deepening your spirituality. There's some basic things that a lot of people need to overcome first. Fear of chemotherapy and treatment is one of them. But for me, I did a lot of work initially when I got my metastatic breast cancer diagnosis in 2014. I did a lot of work on myself and the belief that I was enough because I felt and I knew, I recognized that I was searching outside myself for validation, that I wasn't enough unless somebody else told me I was. I wasn't enough unless I worked really hard, got promotions, made a lot of money, that, unless, men looked at me appreciatively, that kind of thing. I needed validation externally. And I learned how to love myself and know that I was enough just the way I was. I didn't need the external validation after that. But it took some time with a therapist and efforts on my part to really put that piece of my healing journey into place.
Well, I am thinking of my dad who had lung cancer and went through chemo and survived, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or so, and he was telling a friend of mine who's a psychologist, he said, the one thing that he learned out of the whole situation with his lung cancer was it was the first time in his life that he felt truly loved. He couldn't believe how many people were there to support him, to help take care of him. All of that. He'd been the provider. He was the oldest of the kids in his family. He was expected to perform and to get good grades and to do this and do that and felt like he never really lived up to what everybody else's expectations of him were. And as a result, he said he never felt, to your point, deserving of love. And he said that was the big emotional thing that came out of it, even when he lost all of his hair and his hair grew back with no gray hair. Like he was in his 70s.
Oh my
He did
gosh.
not have he died at 80. He did not have a gray hair
No
on his
kidding.
head.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting after it fell out with the chemo. He didn't
Hmm.
have any gray hair at all. But I hadn't thought about that in a while, and there's always an emotional component. It's been my experience in working with tens of thousands of clients over the years for this energy healing stuff. There's always an emotional component in place before any kind of disease or illness manifests, and I believe that's the most important part of a healing in the work that I do, because we can fix body parts all day long, but if you're leaking power because of some emotional thing going on, what's the point? That's the most important part of a healing. Back to your example of the lemon, the one that I like to use is imagine a Disney animated movie that you've watched and you find yourself crying watching the movie, like when Snow White dies or in Frozen when the snowman dies or whatever, and I found myself thinking when I was watching Frozen for the first time, the Frozen 2, I think it was, and I thought, "God, Ryan, get a grip. This is a movie, number 1. Number 2, it's an animated movie, so it's pretend, but yet I'm there boo-hooing watching the movie, and the body's always gonna follow what the brain's telling it.
Yeah, those
So
emotions are being played with those movies when the acting is really good.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's get to and really dissect the 10 different common denominators,
Yeah,
if
and
you
I just
will.
wanna say that in the first book, Radical Remission, there were 9 healing factors, and then in Radical Hope is when Dr. Turner introduced the 10th healing factor. The 10th is exercise and movement, and it didn't come out in the first book because the research was done with people that had been mostly sent home on hospice care. So they couldn't exercise in the traditional sense of the word. They weren't at the gym, they weren't running their marathons, they weren't doing the hardcore workouts that they felt were exercise. But when Dr. Turner looked at it, she said, exercise is such a vital piece of people's overcoming, preventing, healing, all of that. And it's widely studied. There's lots of research on it. How come it didn't come up? She went back, she talked to many of the survivors, looked at her research and the interviews and the surveys and whatnot, and found that everybody was moving their body as much as they could when they could. So if you came home on hospice and you can't get back to the gym, but you start walking around the block to rebuild your strength, that's movement. And that exercise really matters. And we really need to reframe it as movement or physical activity, because it doesn't have to be something you do in the gym. It doesn't have to be strenuous. Gardening, yard work, housework, all of that stuff is movement, which is good for the body. So I'll go from there to diet. So nutrition. What we know from the radical remission survivors is that they all greatly reduced or eliminated meat, wheat, sweets, and dairy. So red meat, we know from the World Health Organization, is a probable carcinogen. So you want to get
Does
rid
that
of
include grass-fed as well, or is it just conventionally raised meat?
it is the red processed meats. So if you're taking a steak from a grass-fed cow, it's not as bad as if you were eating pepperoni or salami or sausage or bacon. Yeah. What I do know about meat, I choose personally not to eat meat, and my integrative doctor recommends that I don't eat any meat, because all animals, regardless of how they're raised, grown, fed, etc., have inherently an animal growth factor. And for my type of cancer and some others, you don't want that animal growth factor potentially helping the cancer to grow. So everybody's got to that's why there is no one single diet for everybody, unfortunately. But it depends on your diagnosis, your, particular intake, your body type, your genetics, et cetera, et cetera. So many things go into it. And everyone needs to make that decision for themselves. The radical remission survivors, some of them were vegan, some of them were keto, some of them did macrobiotic diets. They were all kinds of different diets, but they all greatly reduced or eliminated the meat, the wheat, meaning the refined grains, and really the best thing to do is eliminate the genetically engineered grains. So when you do whole grains, do non-GMO. Organic's even better because it's non-GMO and it's been grown organically. If it's not organic, but it's non-GMO, it hasn't been grown organically, but it's not genetically engineered.
I
So,
I've heard lots of commentary too about European wheat versus American wheat, that people who have gluten sensitivities and other sensitivities to wheat products when they're in Europe, and I've heard a couple of doctors say, "Well, we have fake wheat here, with that's the GMO'd wheat that you addressed a minute ago, but also that the European wheat is the real unadulterated wheat that, you know,
yep,
like,
that we
that
don't have.
Moses was eating back in Moses's time."
Exactly,
Have
exactly.
you
I've had the
found that?
same
Have you
thing.
found that?
Many, many people and several clients and friends who've gone to Europe who either are gluten sensitive, can eat whatever they want in Europe and have no problem. Come home and start eating wheat products and they're miserable. Um, I think it's the genetically engineered crops and a bit of a glyphosate reaction.
Right. Which is what? Tell everybody what that is, please.
Glyphosate is the insecticide, the spray. It's sprayed. It's the bad stuff, the Roundup. Yeah, the bad stuff that gets sprayed on our crops. And unfortunately, there's the blowover. I don't know how long it'll take to get rid of it, but they're not regulating people to stop. Regulations in Europe are so much better than regulations in the United States. And so many more chemicals are allowed in the United States than what European countries allow. And yeah, and the blowover is okay. So the farmer that's using glyphosate blows over onto the farmer that's trying to grow it organically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in the water and
Yes. And it's in the water. And yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. So no wheat, no.
Well, greatly reduced, so don't freak out, people. You can have some occasionally, but buy high quality. Buy the highest quality meat products and, wheat products that you can get your hands on. And then, dairy, and some of the same reasons, the chemicals, the way the animals are raised, and a bit of that animal growth factor that's just inherent in animals. And our dairy products are pretty pretty adulterated as well, right? So if you wanna have Greek yogurt, just buy really good Greek yogurt that doesn't have added sugar and it's, organic. And then the other thing is to reduce the sweets, meaning the sugar, anything with white sugar. You can have all the berries and fruit that you want, but cut out the baked goods and take a look at the labels on the products. They put sugar in salad dressing and everything.
Yeah, in the processed products. I was in a huge oncology center not too long ago with a friend who was being treated there. They had bowls of candy, like, every 3 feet in that place, and I thought, "What are you guys doing?" Sugar is Thomas Friedman from Boston College says that cancer grows on sugar, on glucose, or on fermentation. And somebody who doesn't wanna give up their wine, I say, think of wine this way. It's made from the juice of moldy grapes that they add yeast to ferment. It's a nightmare. If, you got fermentation and sugar because alcohol is like a sugar IV. So somebody that's dealing with cancer, I'm
Not
with
the
you on
thing you
that.
want. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
And alcohol didn't explicitly make the list, but it's the sugar piece. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly. Okay, what are the other
So
10
then we go on
components?
to the other 7, which are the emotional and spiritual factors. So I talked a bit about empowerment, right? Being the advocate for yourself, the CEO of your health. That, has been shown, to really help people because if you're helpless, and you have no hope, right? That's a very different reaction that your mind and body are feeling than if you are feeling empowered and inspired and I got this and I can do my research and I can ask questions. And so that's the kind of patient you want to be, is someone that takes an active role in your healthcare, in making the decisions and getting the information you need in order to make your decisions. Another one is intuition. So, our intuition, scientific fact, we have an intuition, and it's not only located in our brains, but it's also in our gut. Similar neurons, both places. So, when you get a bad feeling in your gut, there's truth to it. It's your intuition trying to tell you something. And if you go within and start to let your intuition know you're ready to pay attention, you want to work with it will start to show up for you more, right? So you give it a little love, it's going to give you something back. But remember, you have to be quiet sometimes in order to hear it. If we constantly have TV and radio and social media and stuff going, we're never going to hear those messages from our intuition, which personally for me is a direct connection to the divine, to source, right? So that voice that's coming to you needs you to be quiet. So break up with busy like I did. That was one of my big things, was to break up with busy and sit and do nothing and just be. Stare out the window, watch the birds in the trees, do whatever you got to do to just relax and listen and start building a meditation practice so that you can get your intuition on board with you.
My girlfriend, the psychologist again, she calls it ADS, always doing something.
Oh, ah, 80, we all have ADD and ADS.
We have
Yeah.
ADS. She told me one time, she said, "You have ADS." I said, "What the heck is that?" She goes, "You're always doing something." I said, "Oh, okay, good."
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So much truth to that. We're so busy, we're so busy, we're so busy. We wear it like a badge of honor. We need to strip that badge off and forget about it and join the simplified movement and just be so much healthier. And along with intuition is spirituality, right? There's some similarity there. They kind of go hand in hand. And deepening your spiritual practice is connecting more to the divine, to source, to God, whatever you want to call it. Connect to nature. Find something bigger than yourself. Find your connection to it. Put a practice in place, like actually sit down each morning, say some prayers or or affirmations or do a meditation, whatever works for you. Take that time to tap in to that spirituality and to find the peace. And sometimes it's about surrendering the outcome. Yeah. And then we have releasing suppressed emotions and increasing positive emotions. Those two factors kind of go hand in hand as well. Increasing positive emotions is pretty straightforward and more simple for people. Like, okay, find more joy, love, and happiness, right? Make sure that every day you're laughing, smiling, enjoying yourself, even if it's only 5 minutes a day. The Radical Remission survivors talked about it like it was a muscle that needs a daily workout, and it can be accomplished in just 5 minutes. But who wouldn't want to laugh, smile, and be joyful 24 hours a day? Well, all right, not while you're sleeping, but um, do it as often as you can. But if you're not the most optimistic person, if you are down in the dumps, if you are feeling really low, if you're struggling with what you're dealing with, just find 5 minutes, laugh at something, find memes that are funny, find jokes that are funny, ask your friends and family to send you things they know you would find enjoyable. Pictures of your grandchildren or your own children or whatever, puppies, baby goats in pajamas, whatever you need. Find something that can boost your happiness, which boosts your immune system. And in the opposite is the releasing suppressed emotions. So a lot of people ask me, "Well, how do I know if I have suppressed emotions?" Well, we've all had some trauma in our life. Some of us have had some pretty big traumas, and we are pretty clear about we've had trauma and we need to work on that. But if we had a childhood, we had trauma. Because when you're 5 or 7 or 11, you don't know how to deal with the adult things that are going on. You don't know how to, you know, deal with that bully and decide, you know what, they don't know what they're talking about, right? We take so much of that in as a child and don't know how to process it, and that becomes our belief system. That bully told us we were ugly, so we believe that for the rest of our lives that we're ugly. Really? No, you need to question those limiting beliefs that you have. But the release of suppressed emotions is not only things from the past and trauma, but in the present moment. Learn to feel your feelings, feel all the feelings, and then release them. Let them wash through you. You don't need to let them get stuck. I was a big stuffer. I would stuff my feelings and emotions down deep in my gut. I know I'm doing it when I clench my fists or I clench my jaw like I'm biting my tongue because I don't want to say something. Guess what? That's a signal that you are pushing something down and not paying attention to it. Now, if you can't do it in the moment, make sure you check back later. Like, go home and every night think about, okay, what kind of things came up for me today that I maybe didn't process? I really maybe need to deal with that? And whatever way works for you to process your emotions, if not in the moment, later, whether it's journaling, whether it's talking with somebody, whether it's screaming in your pillow, beating the drums, dancing, whatever gets it out. We need to let our emotions flow through us and not get stuck. And the other piece of this is stress. It's the stress that we hang on to. It's the stress that builds up on us. And so it's really about learning, how do we keep better tabs and pay more attention to what our body's trying to tell us and manage our stress. Yes, we're always going to have stress. Good things can be stressful. A wedding is stressful. A new baby is stressful. A new house is stressful, but those are also good things. So process it. Let it work through.
Well, and I would say in this day and age, so often it's people would say, well, I need to learn to meditate because that's going to help relieve my stress. Well, what's prayer? Prayer's a form of meditation. Has been around since the beginning of time. So, and even I was raised Roman Catholic, 12 years of Catholic school. So the whole rote memory of the prayers, like saying the rosary or saying the Our Father or something like that, you don't have to think about it. It's like a mantra. You just say it and it helps calm down those stress responses that are in the body. So even if you say, well, I can't meditate, well, read a prayer. listen to a prayer. Whether you're religious or not, doesn't matter. Listen to something along those lines where you don't really have to think about it, but it all has energy to it, and you're helping to bring in that energy that's nurturing, that's calming, that's healing through those different modalities.
Yeah, excellent point. It really is about that relaxation response, like releasing things so that we can get out of fight or flight and back down into the relaxation, rest and repair mode so our bodies have a chance to heal because the stress causes us to run up there at the top of that. I'm almost in the full on stress, fight or flight all the time. That's why breaking up with busy is so important. Like, because if you're always running up there, your body doesn't get a chance to relax and repair and heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we're in fight or flight, we're in inflammation because we've got, you know, all of those cortisol and norepinephrine and all that stuff that's causing chronic inflammation. And what's the root cause of all disease? Chronic inflammation. That's been proven, many, many, many times. Harvard research shows radical remission workshops improve cancer patients' quality of life. How exciting is that? And you had other research institutes that were involved in that project too. Please tell us about that. Tell us what you were studying and tell us what the results have shown to be.
Yes, it was so exciting to have Harvard interested in looking at the radical remission research and studying it. So they did a pilot study on people who took the workshop, and we needed to enroll 200 people. This was about 5 years ago or so. And anybody that was going to take the workshop was asked to please complete the survey before taking the workshop, 1 month after, and 6 months after the workshop. And what Harvard found when they were able to get all of this put together was that the workshop has a significant effect on people. It improves their quality of life. And it not only holds just a month after they take the workshop, but it's still held at 6 months after the workshop. So, what people are learning in that workshop is these 10 lifestyle changes, and then they're asked to put together a plan for themselves. Like, what's your goal? What's your action steps? What are you going to do when you leave this workshop? Whether it's a weekend in person workshop or a 5-week or a 10-week virtual workshop or the online course, the online study program that lets you do it at your self paced. Any version of the workshop was found to really make a difference for people and their quality of life. And that was just a pilot study, but so exciting. And that research study, that the journal article just came out in November of 2024. So it's so validating to have that information through Harvard to be able to say, yes, these lifestyle changes really do make a difference.
So, how's that going to filter down to the typical oncology practice?
Well, that's a really good question. And we hope that it gets a little bit of attention. Certainly, it's in the Integrative Oncology Journal, and it's a respected journal, but conventional oncologists don't always read it. But more and more of individual doctors are starting to look at, they do see that lifestyle medicine makes a difference. And I think you mentioned it earlier, the zeitgeist is changing, and I hope we're shifting to, the individual. Maybe the medical school doesn't teach it, but the individual doctors are seeing that they can take some lifestyle medicine classes, and they've got to have continuing education. So why not learn more about what you can help your patients learn versus just what you can write on a prescription pad. So we hope that the medical community takes notice of this Harvard study, and certainly that name, Harvard, carries a lot of weight with it. So if they would share this with more people, maybe they'll start sharing the book and start telling people about, the opportunity to learn this in workshops. And, we are just so passionate at the Radical Remission Project about educating more people on these lifestyle changes. And they're simple lifestyle changes. They're not always easy, but they are simple. And all of them can be done for relatively little money other than the herbs and supplements. You got to go buy the herbs and supplements. That can be a little bit of cost out of pocket. And some people do choose to do some of these factors in a very costly way. Maybe they do spend a lot of money on doing these with different modalities. But in you know, the foundational sense of it, you can do these things on your own. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do these. Learn them, put your action plan together, start taking baby steps. And we always tell people none of the survivors did everything all at once. Baby steps over time added up to big difference.
Mhm. Tell us about the functional assessment of chronic illness therapy and the spiritual well-being scale.
I'm not gonna be able to answer that one, Julie.
All right.
No.
Okay.
I
We'll
gotta
cut it
get
out.
more information. In fact, we're hopefully doing a podcast interview this week with one of the Harvard researchers to get exactly that. That's our question too. Tell us more about that so we can explain it.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Next thing. Are you okay on time? I've got a few more questions for you. Okay. All right. Do your workshops also address mortality? Do you find your participants are more relaxed about the inevitable passing? I mean, we're all going to pass at some time, whether we're going to pass from a cancer diagnosis or we're going to be hit by a bus, crossing the street. Do you address any of that, and or do you have any thoughts about your participants in your workshops along those lines?
There are a variety of responses to death, as you know, and some people are comfortable with it and some people really aren't. The workshop doesn't specifically dive into the mortality piece. I think I forgot another factor. Strong reasons for living is the one factor where you really look for your why, what's most important to you, what gets you out of bed every day and keeps you going. And that we have an activity where we asked you to look at, you know, if you had $20 billion and you were going to live forever and all, guaranteed success, what would you do? And then the next scenario is, okay, you've got what you've got in your bank account today. And so maybe not a lot of money and you've only got a year and a half to live. What would you do? That really helps people to boil it down to what's important to them. And it does have you facing that inevitable, right, in some way. I personally am a big believer that if we face our death, we can have a better life, right? If we are inevitably going to die. Nobody gets out alive. And if we're too afraid to even look at it or talk about it, how do we know that we're living our best life? For me, I've written my obituary. This is one I want to have said about me when I die. So, this is the stuff that I then need to work on so that gets said about me when I die. And I think it's important to get more comfortable with death because it is inevitable. And you can find more peace in knowing that it's going to happen at some point. You just don't know how or when. And when we're fearful, we're more stressed. We're more in that fight or flight mode. So, facing the fact that we could die either from cancer or, as you said, from the bus that runs the curb next week, get things in order. Face it, talk about it, get more comfortable with it. And but it is not specifically addressed in the workshops. Coaches like me, I address it one-on-one with people and remind everybody that we all have a journey, an individual journey, and along that journey, we might find healing and we might find a cure, but we don't necessarily get both. But wouldn't you want to be healed before you die?
Yeah, and I always give a copy of my angelic attendants, what happens as we transition, to all of my clients, because just what you said, when we take the fear away and we know we're going to be surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets, which university based research corroborates that 90% of people at the end of their lives can see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning. 90%. I know. Well, it takes the fear out, and they're like, "Okay, well, that's the worst thing that can happen is I'm escorted to heaven by angels, and all my loved ones are gonna be there waiting for me once I cross the pearly gates, okay, well, I can try something else that may help me live a more joyful life, and I can take that off of the table as far as something that's afraid. For all of your participants in your workshops, if they go to julieryangift.com, they can get a free digital and audiobook download of my
Oh,
book.
lovely. Lovely.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I will send that to you afterwards. And anybody listening to this, askjulieryangift.com. You are welcome to a free digital and audiobook download. And it just takes the fear out of it, regardless of what somebody's dealing with, and regardless of if they're completely healthy and they've just lost a loved one because of whatever, or they know that, okay, I'm going to be in that case someday. What's going to happen? And, and what's the fear that's connected with that? All right, one last question. I could talk to you all day. I'm so impressed with your work. I know I'm being a big fangirl here, but I really am. I really am a big fangirl here. Why do we incarnate?
Oh, why do we incarnate? Personally, I believe that we incarnate here to learn lessons that we need to learn. And I believe that cancer is a big messenger. It's a wake up call to those things that we need to learn. For me, cancer had me not my first diagnosis, unfortunately, but my second, my metastatic diagnosis got me to pay more attention to what I'm meant to do here. And that as humans, as spiritual beings having human experiences, we are here to learn to love and to grow in those learnings and to really become the best that we can become within this lifetime. And everything that happens to us is a lesson. It's something that's trying to teach us how to grow and how to become a better human and a better spiritual being.
Beautifully said. Do you believe that before you were conceived, that this was part of your spirit or your soul's plan to
Do
experience this
I
this
do.
round?
Yeah, and you're I'm sure familiar with the work of Carolyn Mice. She's Mice. I'm never quite sure how she pronounces that. Um, Soul contracts. I read her book about soul contracts, and I do believe that before I was born, there was some kind of contract set up that said, "This is a lesson you need to learn. This is how you're best gonna learn it, and these are the people that you're best to learn it with."
Mhm. And I have so many people when I say that because I agree with you. It's stuff that we come in to explore and experience. People say, "Why in the name of God would I choose to go through this?" That just makes no sense. And yet, oftentimes, those are the first people that'll say, "That was awful going through that. And here's what I gleaned from the whole adventure." And if you ask them, would they change anything? Most of the time, they'll say, "Probably not,"
Right.
because it was beneficial in some
Exactly.
way.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so many people I've talked to that have had a cancer diagnosis that, not right away, but later they learn, like, it was almost a gift. Like, people get a little touchy about the wording of it. It's cancer's not a gift, but it is a messenger, and it wakes you up to reprioritizing your life, doing things differently, making the changes that you need to make so that you can be a better you, a healthier you, be around longer, do different things. You know, we get so caught up in the human doing that we forget that we can just be, and that those connections with people are more important than the stuff that we're doing.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. You are so extraordinary, my girl. Holy schmoly. You are brave. You got some serious golden ovary courage going on. Guys have breast balls, girls have golden ovaries.
I did
Not
not know
only
that.
not only to go through everything you've been through personally, but then having the guts to share this and make this available to the masses and help others on their journeys and dedicate your life to helping fellow cancer patients and survivors and their families and loved ones. I mean, you're just extraordinary. And see, your dog agrees with me
Yeah, I'm
in the
sorry. She's like,
background.
"I'm ready to get out now, mom."
He's like, I'm ready for some food, mom.
Yeah.
So how can
Thank
people
you.
learn more? Learn more. You are most welcome. So deserving. How can okay.
See if we can shut her off a little bit.
I was gonna say you can go get her and bring her and put her on your lap if you want.
She would like that, but
She'd like that. Okay.
finish up without her.
How can people learn more about you and your work?
Oh, I would love it if people would take a look at radicalremission.com. They will find out more about the Radical Remission Project, the events that are offered, the coaches that can help coach, the docu-series is listed there, the Harvard research is there, our podcast, Stories That Heal, about people like me, radical remission survivors that have overcome. They can listen to that. And then if they want to get in touch with me personally, my private practice is Health Navigators, and our website is healthnavs.com. And my email address is carla@healthnavs.com.
All right. And we'll have all of that in the show notes too. So thanks once again for sharing all this just life-changing advice and information
Well, thank you
that
for
is
allowing me. Yeah.
oh
I
goodness.
love this
I
is
don't
my passion to share this work and to get more people to know about it. And thank you for all those nice things you said.
yeah, I don't know of anybody that hasn't been affected by cancer, that hasn't either had somebody affected in their family or they themselves or they know somebody. It's just so ubiquitous
It is.
in
It's
our,
unfortunately, yeah.
in our population. And so I think the work that you do is just extraordinary and so important to help others. So with that, everybody's sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from Chicago, too, where Karla is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.